Welcome back, everyone, to the first Persistence podcast of the year. I'm Helen Totten, president of Girls Learn International.
I'm Michelle Acosta, vice president of GLI.
And I'm Emma Nash, the secretary of GLI.
Today on the Persistence podcast, we are joined by Linda Oberhaus, CEO of the Shelter for Abused Women and Children in Naples. Welcome to our podcast, and thank you again for your time this afternoon.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Could you please tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Oh, sure. So I, before coming to Naples, I lived in Tampa for 25 years, and I worked at the Domestic Violence Center for 12 years before coming to Naples to run this center. So I've been here in Naples now for the last 17 years.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
All right. And then just a question before we start. Is there any specific, why have you become such a strong advocate for domestic violence? And, what keeps you going through this job?
Mm-hmm. So, oh, goodness. Well, when I first began working with victims of domestic violence back when I was still an undergraduate at that point, it was right around the time that the O.J. Simpson case was happening. And so I know that you guys are probably aware there has been a recent documentary film that has come out. But that really impacted me. I think it impacted the entire country. I think domestic violence prior to the O.J. Simpson event was really just considered a private family matter. And that really pushed it out into the forefront where law enforcement began taking domestic violence more seriously. And because this was a time when you could be arrested for assaulting a stranger, but you couldn't be arrested for assaulting your partner or your spouse, which seems a little crazy,
yeah.
But that's just the way things were back then.
Mm-hmm. And if you are comfortable sharing, what is the most impactful story that you've seen throughout your years of contributing to this cause?
Okay, goodness. So many. We'll see if I can... it's actually a victim of human trafficking that comes to mind. Or did you prefer a victim of domestic violence?
That works, whatever you'd like to share.
Okay. So before I share the story with you, what I will say is that victims of domestic violence, when they come into the shelter, many of them have, I would say just about all of them, have had an impact on their self-esteem. So they have been verbally abused, if not physically abused, and in many cases, both. But they actually look differently from the time they come in until the time they leave the shelter. It's incredible. It's like a transformation happens. And so victims of domestic violence, generally speaking, when they're in a relationship where somebody is telling them things about themselves, somebody that they love is saying, you're never going to have anyone else, nobody will ever want you, you're not pretty, you're stupid, you're fat. And this is typical of abusers. This is what they do. Even the most capable, even the smartest women, they actually begin believing those stories. And so, or at least what they're hearing. And so they come into the shelter believing that. But the advocates, what we have in common is that we can actually see the truth. And the truth is she's intelligent, capable, smart, beautiful, a good mom, all the things. All the things that her abuser said she wasn't, she actually is those things. So she rediscovers those as she rediscovers those things as she works her way through our program. That's why she looks so different when she leaves. Mm-hmm. And so there is a couple of spokespeople for the shelter. One in particular, she came through our counseling services. This is a victim of domestic violence. And she had 2 children. They were both in counseling at the time. And her mom and dad lived in Naples. she had to flee that domestic violence situation. She was both verbally and physically abused. And her husband at the time, he would marry several times after that and would abuse each of the wives after that. And she came to the shelter. She got services for herself and she got services for her kids. She never had to live at the shelter. Her parents were able to put her in a hotel under an alias, so protect the parents and protect her at the same time. And the therapist that worked with her said one thing to her that she says changed her life. And that was, if you take a frog and you put it in boiling water, it'll jump right out. But if you take a frog and you put it in water and you slowly turn up the heat, it will stay there until it dies. And that analogy right there, that is domestic violence, right? So a lot of people, they think, well, if I was in that situation, I would just leave, I would just get out. A lot of people, they think that's the truth, but domestic violence doesn't happen overnight, because if any of us dated someone who hit us on the first date or even the second, or said terrible things to us, we would never be with those people. So they tend to hide that part of themselves for a period of time until they feel like it's safe then to begin with this abusive behavior.
I mean, that just gave me chills. Like, chills all over. You don't realize that you're in that situation until you're kind of in that situation. I think it's
Yeah, it's right up close. And this particular victim, she would tell you that she would have a boundary, and she would say, "This is my boundary," and then he would cross it. And then she would set a new boundary, and he would cross it. And this happened over and over again until it was just so close. The violence was just so close that she did have to get out. And she's lucky that she lived. And sadly, his last wife did not live. He killed her as well as her 15-year-old daughter. When she was notified by her brother-in-law that he had done this horrific act, she was extremely in fear of her life. And so the brother-in-law had to say to her again, well, he actually committed suicide after he murdered his wife and his stepdaughter. And she just said she never thought that he would actually leave this world without taking her with him. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'm just curious about that and how you were talking about like her safety and stuff like that throughout the shelter. Our advisor was telling us how there's security there at all times. Mm-hmm. Have you guys had to deal with many people trying to get to the shelter and being unsafe? Or has it been relatively okay? Or I'm just curious how that goes.
I would say that we're probably one of the safest shelters in the nation.
Wow.
Yeah. So I would invite the three of you to come take a look if you'd like to come see. We have very high-tech security. So we have cameras inside and out. We have security on site. The advocates can monitor cameras as well as security. We have a wall that's surrounding the entire shelter. Anyone who lives with us, you would never see their cars in the front parking lot. So an abuser could drive around, which I'm sure they do. You can find anything these days on the internet, right? But they will never see their victim's car parked. So there's actually a special place where they park.
That's really nice to hear. That's nice that it's so locked up, and especially because there are children there, and you never know what can happen, but that's really nice to hear. Yeah.
Yes. It's actually a felony to trespass on domestic violence property. There are signs posted all around the wall, all the way around the entire property. So anyone who does scale the wall or try to come onto the property, they can be charged with a felony.
Yeah. Wow.
Where do you find the most support or empowerment in your career?
In what way?
Like, what makes your career kind of not, like, what, how can I word this differently?
Like, is there anything that makes you keep going with your job every day? Because I'm sure it can
Oh,
get
sure.
hard, or it's overwhelming to run such a
Yeah.
big thing. But what keeps you going throughout this?
What's a motivator, like, the biggest you'd say?
The women and children, by far, they're amazing. And so, like I said, that old starfish, like if you just save one, there's like the old poem.
Yeah.
So it's really just about creating a safe haven for women and children to be. I mean, I've even had a victim send me an email saying, I never had to use your shelter, but I always knew it was there. And just knowing it was there gave me hope and allowed me to get through. I get up every day, and I get up, and it's all about the women and children.
Yeah. Yeah, and we were going to ask what the most rewarding aspect of your career is, but it sounds like it's just being able to see that and see how much you are making an impact. So
Yes.
that's really nice to hear.
Yeah, and I tell you that we have an army at the shelter, an army. And when I say that, they're all mission focused. It's a requirement to work at the shelter. You have to be there for the right reasons. We talk about being happy, healthy, and whole. You can't give what you don't have. These women and children are coming to us in probably one of the most worst situations they've had to face. And so we need to have the healthiest staff available to them at all times. And so that's my goal, is to make sure that we have 100% healthy staff to be able to support the women and children.
And last couple questions.
All right.
How can listeners that not even need to reach out, or like, how can they get involved? The listeners, how can they get involved and with the shelter and even of the broader fight against domestic violence?
Sure. So they can visit napleshelter.org. That's our website. There are drop-down boxes. They can click on volunteer or like get more information. Type their name and contact information in there, and a member of our team will contact them to see how they might want to get involved, and we'll pair them up with the best volunteer opportunity for them.
Yeah, at our club, we did just a simple penny drive, and it was really easy to get that money to you guys, and it's a lot easier to support the cause than you think.
Yeah, and we've done bake sales here and then sent that money over, and it's not that much money, but I figure anything helps,
It sure does.
Yeah.
Yep.
And it's just nice to know that we are able to support such a good cause, and that this shelter is close to us, and it's making such a big difference in people's lives.
Well, for those who have listened today, if they're interested, they can visit our website, and they can also take a tour of both the Naples shelter and the Immokalee shelter. Nice. And so you can get a feel for, like, what is it? So, what does it look like inside? Yeah. So in the event that they know someone who is in need of those services, they can make those photographs or videos or whatever available to that person.
And I think that is so important too, to have all these opportunities for all these people. So it's blowing my mind. It's crazy.
I didn't realize how in depth it was and exactly how much was put into it. But again, like I said earlier, it's just nice to know that this resource is here for everyone, anyone we know, or we can, just that it's there. It's really great.
And what's important? Back in the day, there was some myths around who could come into shelter and who couldn't. You don't need an injunction for protection, but we can help you get that if you want one. You don't need a police report, but we can help you get that if you need one. So really, there's only two things that need to be true in order to come into the shelter. That you are a victim of domestic violence or human trafficking, and that you have no other safe place to stay, and that's it. So you don't need a police report, you don't need an injunction, you don't need proof. We're just going to believe you if you say that you're in danger.